appreciate the good prayer this morning. We're in the 31st chapter of the book of Psalms this morning. And Tyler's lesson is Weather and the Blues. The thought this morning is God can lift you up when you feel down. And as we said last week as we opened up, God is above all circumstances that you'll face in this life. And David here found himself in some kind of trouble, in some kind of distress. The Bible don't speak specifically what was wrong with David, but the 9th and 10th verse gives us some idea of that chapter, that David was battling some kind of enemy, some kind of personal problem in his life, or something of that nature. And David showed this in these first 8 verses. Is where our lesson comes from. David shows his confidence in God to handle the situations that he can't handle. And if you never have yet, you will run into circumstances in this life that you won't know how to handle and you won't be able to handle by yourself. And it all depends on where this morning that we put our trust and where we put our faith. And this is what David opened up with in this first verse of the 31st chapter. He said, "In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust." So David had a relationship with God, and he stated that in God he would put his trust. People in David's day, just like you do today, put their trust in many, many different things. But there's only one thing that's known to man that you can fully trust in, and that's God. And David decided to put his trust in that God that he knows, in the God that had delivered him from past trouble, in the God that had delivered his forefathers from bondage, from the great things that God done for the children of Israel when they come out of Egypt, for the great things that God done for his children when he put them in the land of Canaan, and for the great things that God had done for David in his life. He said, "In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust." And this morning, that's where that I have all of my trust. I trust in a lot of things to get me through this life. But I trust in the Lord to take care of everything in this life that I stand in need of. And he says, "Let me never be ashamed." Let me never be ashamed, or God never let me fall into disgrace. And if David was fighting one of his enemies here, and what caused him to pray to God, or what caused his trouble, God knew it was, David knew, Brother Rod, it was a disgrace for God's people to be defeated. And when it comes to being ashamed of the things, and we can fall into disgrace or shame by our own doings, by the doings of somebody that we trusted to do a specific thing for us, or many things can cause us to be disgraced. Or we can bring disgrace upon one another. We can bring shame on our family and on our churches this morning.
Yeah.
We can bring shame on everybody that lives or knows anything about us this morning.
That's true.
I see members of churches, and I see preachers of churches disgrace and shame their church by their action.
Yeah.
So David's praying to God here, Brother Rod, that don't let his life fall into such a pattern that it would be disgraced. I can do things this morning that will make my family ashamed of me. Me or Rod, either one could do things this morning that will cause this church to be ashamed of us. So our prayer this morning is to God, just like David did, Lord, never let us be ashamed.
Right. Good word.
How do we keep ourselves out of falling into disgrace or into shame? What did David say? O Lord, into thee I put all of my trust.
Yeah.
So if we trust God this morning, and we put all of our trust into him and walk according to his commandments and his laws and his judgments, then Brother Rod, that'll bring glory to our life instead of shame. But he prayed, Brother West, to God to never let me fall into disgrace and never let me fall into shame. Which David did at certain points in his life, Brother Ron. And let me read you something here to go along with what I told you. Some people like to know, how do you know David was in trouble? Look at the 9th verse. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am in trouble. My eyes is consumed with grief, yea, my soul and my belly. So David is completely consumed with the trouble of some kind. Now listen to the 10th verse. It's not in your lesson now. Listen to the 10th verse. For my life is spent with grief. When you fall into grief, do you want to live that way the rest of your life? Nobody does. And my years is filled with sighing. And my strength faileth because of my iniquities. So our life will be consumed and fail in our sins. And David said, my bones are consumed. So when we're away from God, we're in trouble. We're in the biggest trouble we could ever get in. But now let's go back to the first verse. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in thy righteousness. Now, if you got in trouble this morning, you had trouble in your soul, and you're dealing with these things, and you go to God in prayer, are you going to tell God what good things you've done that you think you deserve him to forgive you or to watch over you? But David said, God, deal with me according to in God's standard of righteousness, he owns all to himself. You say, what do you mean by that? He is the only one that is righteous, and he is the only one that can deliver true judgment. We don't know how to figure that out. But deal with me this morning, Lord, according to thy righteousness, according to thy judgments. Bow down thy ear to me, deliver me speedily. So David was in so much trouble of heart or mind or within me or whatever it might have been, that he felt like he needed God to answer him speedily. But look at this. He said, bow down thine ear unto me. As if you was having to bow down to close to somebody that was weak to hear their voice. And David asked God to bow his ear down unto him, Brother Rod, because he considered himself in this condition that he was in so much trouble, in so much turmoil, that he couldn't speak out, but he wanted God to listen closely to what he had to say. And knowing God would hear his words. Then he asked him to answer him speedily. And he said, be thou my strong rock. When you're in trouble, you need something strong to hold on to. Be thou my strong rock, and be unto me for an house of defense to save me. When you enter into God's protection, as David was, you can rest assured that you're in a house of defense, that the troubles of this life and the wiles of the devil can't get to it. Be unto me a house of defense. For to save me. There's no rock that you can run to. There's no house that you can go into like the rock of the Lord, or like his house, or his salvation. When God lifts you up, you're lifted up, and no man or nothing can take you down. Right. And David says, for thou art my rock and my fortress. David knowed, and I know myself from past experience in my own life, Barry, I know God is my rock and my fortress. I know he's the house of defense that I can run into in the time of trouble and the time of problems. Therefore, for thy name's sake, lead me and guide me. Who we look at this morning to lead us and guide us. You know as well as I do that there's not a political leader in the world. There's not a power in this world can lead us to a place where that we're on the solid rock and where we're safe from all sides. But God can do that. Now, before I read this next verse, you ever had trouble to come on you just like that, and you never know it? No way of combating it in your own mind, or in your own way. But it's sudden. Well, God knowed about it before that it come to you. Huh? Listen to this. Listen to what he says here. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privily for me. Huh? My enemy has laid a snare and a net for me privily, and I'm sure they're going to be consumed by it. But God, keep me away from that. God knows about those nets and those snares before you get into them. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privily for me. For thou art my strength. You ever been going down the road in the car and you, the people that drive, and this, all of a sudden something come at you from nowhere, and you say, and you miss them, and you say, how did that happen? Yeah. Well, I just wonder how that happened. It's because the great God of heaven knows the troubles we're going to face before we face them, and God can keep us out of those troubles. And if we get into that trouble, God is strong enough with His strength, He can pull us out of it. And you know what that tells me? You can't pull yourself out of it. It takes God's strength to be pulled out of it. Into thy hand I commit my spirit.
Yeah. Bless the Lord.
God's big old hand.
Bless you, Bill.
You can commit everything that you got to Him, and you can feel safe and secure because you have trusted Him, and He'll bring you through.